as you can. Let's do this.
Before the age of mega-budget MCU flicks, we had deep, grounded superhero movies spearheaded by the likes of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and the X-Men franchise. It's actually been a while since I've shown my favourite mutants some love, so today I'm presenting the top 25 X-Men God Mode scenes in the movies. Always got to start strong, and this is as strong as it can get when it comes to overpowered mutants. Dark Phoenix might not be remembered for the right reasons, but it did give us a few sparkling moments, and Michael Fassbender's performance as Magneto stands tall as one of the highlights. The train fight scene with the Dabari aliens was a sight to behold in general, but it was when Eric decided to go all out that things really got serious. Bro was just playing in the beginning when he was controlling shards of metal as his weapons. He saved the good stuff when all the enemies were right where he wanted them to be. I gotta say, man, I've seen this guy do some brutal stuff, but to crush a train like that in the blink of an eye and not even look back, now that's colder than a grade A Giga Chad. Anya Taylor-Joy has had an amazing rise to the top, and I'm all for it. I became a fan right from 2015's The Witch, so I was overjoyed to see her finally gain recognition from the Queen's Gambit. Of course, everyone's talking about how she slayed it in the menu, but I want to bring your attention to when she slayed a whole army of smiley men in the New Mutants. First of all, why on earth would you call such creepy ghouls smiley men? I couldn't use emojis for a whole week after I saw those freaks. Anyway, Magic's confrontation against the Smiley Men was a top tier moment with her slicing through all of them in no time. I really liked her sword design, although I can't say the same about Charlie Heaton's reaction to getting saved. Bro might have actually just walked into the set thinking he was in one of those flashback scenes from Stranger Things.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else.
Halle Berry was on a roll during the 90s, and she took that energy with her into the 21st century through a gig as Storm in the X-Men franchise. Looking back on that call, I gotta say it was the perfect casting choice because I can't see anyone else playing that character as well as she did. Yes, this includes Alexandra Shipp as well. When Storm first made her appearance in the movie, she didn't exactly come across as a deadly assassin or anything like that. But then Toad pissed her off and she unleashed her powers as a literal weather goddess. Her attack on Toad wasn't just a humiliating defeat, bro actually got sent to meet the amphibian gods after that lightning blast. Wait a second, doesn't that make her an anti-hero? Just like the Wolverine? I mean, I never thought about it like that.
All right. No. No. Move! Go!
Speaking of the Wolverine, here's an entry from his movie, but the focus is on his kid. Well, she's technically like a clone kid, but you get what I mean, don't you? X-23 is a deadly weapon when set loose, and she shows the receipts when she takes on Donald's men in absolutely savage fashion. If you ever wanted to see a kid going God mode, then this is it. There's no mercy on display as Laura slashes through all of her attackers with aggressive grunts and ferocious skills. From her interviews, Daphne Keane is actually a very sweet kid, but I guess Logan isn't exactly meant to be a family-friendly film. Honestly speaking, it just goes on to show how talented she is as an actress to be able to act with such intensity even though she's a child. Man, I really hope that the MCU uses her in their future plans. X-23 can easily become the next big icon of the franchise.
Last ride. Welcome.
know what I'm doing. This is
The only way.
If you were born in the Gen Z era, you might not recognize Famke Janssen, but believe me, she's a name you need to remember. Apart from a highly successful career including the James Bond and Taken franchises, she's the OG Jean Grey and also the first one to unleash the powers of the Phoenix on the big screen. While she might have given into the dark side in X-Men The Last Stand, it was in the finale of X2 where she first tapped into her Phoenix powers. The scene in itself shows us how capable Jean is as a mutant because she ends up saving her entire team from certain doom. No, seriously, she stopped a freaking flood while also raising the X-Jet at the same time. Of course, there are better entries to come, but this is by no means a puny god flex.
The professor can help. He can fix it.
I don't want to fix it.
When you hear the phrase faster than a speeding bullet, you'll probably think of someone like Superman or The Flash. However, in this case, it's none other than Ryan Reynolds in one of his most forgettable roles to date. To be fair, he isn't fake Deadpool in this particular scene, so he's off the hook for now. I've become quite a big fan of this sequence because Wade Wilson steps up to the task and delivers with flawless execution. I mean, I hate to admit it, but this guy might actually be more skilled as a swordsman if you were to compare him to the real Deadpool. Whether he's slashing enemies, deflecting bullets, or even slicing them, this moment is truly worthy of being god tier, and I'm sure the Wolverine himself would approve of this. He was a first-hand witness after all.
Okay. People are dead.
If you didn't have that mouth on you, Wade, you'd be the perfect soldier.
You might have noticed that the first entry I covered was only one half of that whole scene. Well, it's because Magneto reigns supreme only during that part of the sequence. He actually unleashes more of his powers here when he launches a military-grade attack on Vuk with an artillery of machine guns. Unfortunately for him though, he's not the star of this entry. In my personal opinion, the writers kind of messed up the chance to make Vuk a menacing villain with a respectable fan following. What they ended up giving us was a very bored Jessica Chastain. Having said that, we shouldn't take anything away from Vuk, who totally owned this scene by taking in the firepower and beating Magneto to a pulp right after. Yeah, you're definitely worthy of god status if you can dominate Eric with that kind of ease.
Because it's so much easier to understand your language when you're not screaming.
Dark Phoenix is really killing it with a number of entries here. These are back-to-back mentions. It kind of makes you wonder how the film flopped so hard if it had this many decent moments in it. So the fight begins in the trains, but Jean Grey wastes no time in changing the battleground to a barren wasteland. Her fight against the remaining Dabari aliens did feel as if the creators wanted to go for some fan service, but that doesn't hinder the fact that the Phoenix totally owns everyone in the room, or in this case, the open field. She even recovers from a stab through the chest and instantly evaporates her attacker, as if nothing even happened. What kind of cheat code did they exactly give you for this movie, Sophie? Maybe Sansa was still upset with the way things ended in Game of Thrones, eh?
Sorry, Charles.
Eric, please, be the better man. You haven't
But I don't trust you.
Eric, there will be no turning back!
Remember when I said Sebastian Shaw could have become the toughest opponent ever in the X-Men universe? Well, the only reason that isn't a reality today is because of Mr. Magneto himself and a little bit of support from Professor X. Okay, maybe little is the wrong word to use here, but because this entry is more of a godly combo consisting of both Magneto and Charles Xavier fusing their powers to defeat a common enemy.
This is what we're going to do. I'm going to count to 3, and I'm going to move the coin.
You'd imagine a guy like Shaw would be able to survive a nuclear explosion. However, he's only effective when he's in control of his mind, and that's where Professor X steps in to allow his buddy Eric to land the final blow. What really stands out in this scene is the dramatic aesthetic to it. I mean, it's just a coin sliding through a guy's skull, but the editing and music add a lot of depth to this sequence.
They're just following orders.
I've been at the mercy of men just following orders. Never again.
You know all those dangerous mutants you hear about on the news? I'm the worst one.
Don't you just love powerful mutants with anger issues? To this day, I'm still a bit confused about how I should feel about Pyro. The man is definitely a capable fighter, but his intentions aren't exactly the best placed amongst his peers. I guess a lot of that has to do with this scene, where he finally loses his cool and unleashes his flames on those cops. I've always been a sucker for people with fire powers, so this scene does appeal to me more favourably than others. Come to think of it, Pyro did just witness Wolverine getting shot in the head, so I guess his rage here is somewhat justified. Of course, there's also the fact that Logan eventually ejected the bullet out of his skull, so it kind of made the whole thing feel redundant.
My brother asked you a simple question.
Why are you being such a...
Yeah, why are you being such a...
Because I can.
Hey!
For musicians, the biggest stage they can perform on are at stadiums. Michael Jackson, Beyonce, and now The Weeknd have all showcased their dominance in the industry with sold-out shows all over the world. I guess that must have been what inspired Magneto in a way, because bro literally lifted an entire stadium and took it to his audience. On the one hand, he saved everyone the cost of travelling to see him, but then again, the whole point of doing this was to trigger a mass killing. Like, there's a limit to flexing your powers, but Eric doesn't seem to understand that. Somebody did this back in the Stone Age, they'd immediately be accepted as a god, so this scene definitely belongs here. Considering Sir Ian McKellen's Magneto is also in this movie, I'm sure he would have given the stamp of approval to Michael Fassbender.
So much for being a survivor. Don't let it control you.
In the world of X-Men, the biggest possible achievement you can accomplish is defeating Charles Xavier, aka Professor X. Jean Grey went a few steps further and completely annihilated him from the face of the earth. Yeah, I know he managed to survive by transferring his conscience, but still, that was one of the deadliest attacks I've ever seen in the series. By now, Jean's completely given into the power of the Phoenix, and the way she dominates her mentor is captivating as well as terrifying. It didn't even feel like a matchup, because Charles has no leeway to do anything, even with Magneto by his side. Side note though, I really like the makeup effects on her face because it separates Jean from the Phoenix as a distinct character. But man, if this is what happens when you anger a god, we all better start praying every single day.
Jean. Enough. Enough!
Remember, the point between rage and serenity.
Okay, now I know what you're thinking. A stadium is a lot heavier than a submarine. Yeah, I mean I agree with that logic, but look at it this way. Magneto was already an experienced fighter by the time he did his thing in Days of Future Past. Here in First Class though, he hasn't even come up with his alter ego's name. As a matter of fact, this was Eric's first proper test to push himself to the next level. It took a lot of training and support from his buddy Charles to be able to achieve this, and the way the scene is shot also adds a lot of weight to the overall act. It's dramatic, the stakes are high, and most importantly, this scene reignites Eric's belief that he is powerful enough to take on the world. Unfortunately though, he went on to become a villain with that mentality.
How about now?
I prefer the real Raven.
I said the real Raven. Perfection.
You can fire your arrows from the Tower of Babel, but you can never strike God!
How can this be a God mode video if it doesn't have an actual God in it? Apocalypse was a welcome addition to the X-Men franchise, although I would have loved it if he carried on as a villain, similar to how Thanos was there for the Avengers. He's got everything you need to be a top tier final boss, but I guess the studio execs had other things in mind.
No more!
No more superpower.
Apart from a thrilling performance by Oscar Isaac, the reason why Apocalypse works as a threat is his attachment to mutants. Sure, he's using them for his own plans, but he also takes time to understand them. It's like he's got all this empathy, and then suddenly bro's threatening to detonate the world with its own nuclear artillery. That's a pretty grand statement if you ask me. Alright, so we're in top 10 territory now, and I'm kicking things off with the legendary kitchen scene executed by the tricky Quickie himself. Quicksilver immediately walked into our hearts with this sequence because it does two things. First, we get a good idea of how capable the man is, and second, he makes it known that he's a man of culture, which is always welcome in the superhero genre. Bro violated an entire security team within a second and had the three greatest X-Men just standing there in disbelief. Evan Peters has the weird habit of either playing psychotic killers or comic relief characters. Personally, I prefer him as a quick-witted rascal with a keen sense of humour because that's what gets the crowd rooting for you.
The only thing I'm guilty of is fighting for people like us.
You take karate? You know karate, man?
Also, if Quicksilver is that good around a kitchen, shouldn't that mean he can cook a full-course meal in an instant? Childhood trauma can be a messed up thing to deal with, and we all know that Eric has a lot of it. Poor guy's never been able to catch a break throughout his entire life, which is why his villain arc is so easy to understand. Of course, guys like Apocalypse know how to exploit these feelings, and that brings us to the deadly power burst scene at Auschwitz. It's a bad enough scene that Magneto is at the place where it all began for him, especially having just lost his wife and daughter. Then he gets boosted by a literal mutant god. What follows is nothing short of extraordinary as he controls even the tiniest of metals inside rocks and unleashes a magnetic tornado. Kudos to Mr. Fassbender once again for conveying such intense emotions during this flex. He really sells the fact that he's reached a whole nother power level. A did mention Pyro earlier in this list, but Iceman definitely deserves to be placed higher than him, probably because he kicks his butt in this fight. Normally, nobody would ever bet on an ice guy defeating a fire guy. I mean, pretty much all of us have played Pokemon while growing up, haven't we? So it was most definitely a bit of a shock to see Bobby suddenly transforming into the Iceman in the middle of Pyro, unleashing his flames on him. It's as godly as one can get with that kind of power because he's defeating someone who's supposed to have a blatant advantage against him. And if that wasn't enough, bro even violates his opponent with a one-liner after that. That kind of reminds me of one of those Mike O'Hearn memes.
Maybe you should go back to school. You never should have left.
Let go, Jean! Jean, let go!
The Apocalypse entry narrowly missed out on making it to the top 10, but Jean Grey easily finds her way here because she's the only one who burns him to a crisp. I'm a bit bothered by the fact that she needs to rely on her Phoenix powers to make it to my list, but in this case, she does look like she's in control of the situation. What makes her display stand out is the fact that she quickly defeats an opponent the entire X-Men army was struggling against. It's a savage sequence that gives us a good idea of how capable she is as a fighter, as long as she doesn't go rage mode. I wonder if she tapped into her inner Hulk and thought of Apocalypse as a puny god. My Queen Storm gets another feature, and it's one of my favourite scenes of all time. I've actually given the top spot to this sequence in some of my other lists, but it's important to be fair and neutral as per the topic. Fighting off a bunch of jets is no easy feat, and neither is summoning an army of tornadoes, so Storm gets herself a double whammy here. What I like the most about this scene is the fact that she's not struggling with anything, it's just another day at the office for her. I don't think people realise how strong she really is, because the movies haven't really given her a lot to work with, given the popularity of guys like Wolverine and Magneto. But having said that, I'm sure Storm can put up just as much of a fight as any of the other top-rated mutants. I'm sure you might be thinking, where the heck is Wolverine? Well, here he is, in my top 5, where he rightly belongs. Logan has some intense powers and skills, the most prominent of which are his adamantium claws. Of course, we've all seen him flex those weapons across his entire existence in the X-Men universe, but it's his healing ability that really sets him apart from other mutants. Yeah, he can take a bullet to the head or a sword to the heart, but more importantly, Bro can absorb the impact of a freaking atomic bomb. The Nagasaki scene from 2013's The Wolverine is a highlight, not just for Logan, but also Hugh Jackman as an actor. The visual of him looking all burnt up after the explosion was a powerful statement of his abilities, and even though Ichiro turned out to be the most ungrateful friend in the world, it was nice to see our man recovering at god-level speed. Magneto loves lifting, doesn't he? Also, huge shout out to Sir Ian McKellen for setting such a strong base for the younger Eric to build on. I've always maintained that I slightly prefer the OG Magneto to the younger one, and this scene is one of my many reasons why I feel that way. Bro felt so insecure around Jean that he lifted an entire bridge just to remind everyone who he is. Make no mistake though, this is a man who doesn't just have magnetic powers, his mind is just as useful. That's kind of why he had someone with Phoenix powers on his side. Well, for the most part anyway.
It's time to end this war.
Now, you might have memorized this scene by heart, judging from the number of times I've featured it on my channel. But what can I do? It keeps calling me back every time I look at stuff to cover. Apart from showcasing his impeccable range of skills, what Nightcrawler does really well over here is his general sense of awareness. Bro's got everyone on high alert because he knows the layout of the White House better than the president himself. I wouldn't be surprised if the action choreography was actually inspired from real-life hitmen because some of his attacks looked way too realistic. Once again, we need a solo Nightcrawler movie. I hope you're listening, Disney. Well, if the kitchen scene made it to the top 10, it's only fair for the mansion scene to be in the top 2. Quicksilver makes everything look like he's playing some kind of video game, which kind of makes sense because he was introduced as a gamer nerd in the first place. Of course, the man has a lot of noble intentions, which is why he's here saving so many mutants in the first place, but sometimes I think Bro's way too fast for his own liking. The only instance of speed I've seen which is more intense than the mansion rescue is probably when Flash reverses time in the Snyder.
No, don't shoot!
It's a little ironic that the weakest installment of the OG X-Men trilogy claims the top spot in today's video. But how could I not include this? This literally spells out god-level disaster in mutant language. Once again, it's the Phoenix who comes out to play, but the devastation she causes simply can't be put into mere words. She went in so hard, only the Wolverine could go up to her because of his rapid healing powers. And come to think of it, Logan's had quite a few guest appearances on this list today. But yeah, to see such a merciless onslaught speak volumes about the deadliness of the mutant that we all know as Jean Grey.
Save me.
I love you.
Hope you liked the video, so please subscribe to the channel and check the description for links to my socials. In the meantime, here's another video that you're going to enjoy.